So thank you for joining us, and we hope that you get a lot out of this. With that, let me give you an intro so you know who you're talking to today. We're going to start with Diana. She's a licensed clinical social worker, a psychotherapist, business coach, and business development advisor. And she's been helping people and organizations grow, change, and flourish. She's been doing psychotherapy since 1995. She also has been an active community leader in Brooklyn and is a Brooklyn resident over the past 20 years, working with nonprofits and businesses. She's led a number of community projects, loves to galvanize people around causes and events, create strategies for growth, and has secured funding for capital campaigns and nonprofits. She's a very active community member on the board of the North Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, and has worked with some clients like Campaign Against Hunger, the Firehouse North Brooklyn Community Center, Brownsville Community Culinary Center, New York Sunworks, Streb Inc., and Alive Structures. And then we also are fortunate to have Lewis Schiff, who's the chairman of the Board of Experts for Birthing of Giants, which he'll talk to us about a little bit more. He founded Inc. Magazine's Business Owners Council, where he interviewed some of the most accomplished entrepreneurs in the world. He has authored or co-authored several books on success, including The First Habit, The One Technique That Can Change Your Life, and Business Brilliant, Surprising Lessons from the Greatest Self-Made Business Icons. Over the past 2 decades, he built and sold 2 media businesses to publicly traded companies, iVillage and TheStreet.com. So with that, I'm going to turn it over first to Diana. Diana, could you give us a little bit of an intro as to sort of why we came up with this webinar, why that you feel that it's important, and what you're sort of hoping that folks will be able to get out of it today? You need to unmute, please.
Okay. As we were just chatting before we went live, you know, Randy can attest to, after interviewing hundreds of people throughout all the corridors of Brooklyn, everybody knows there is a tremendous amount of trauma. And just the one example he just gave, on one extreme of a Haitian family who had to shut down, I think, their restaurant because they lost 3 members to COVID. It wasn't because of the, conditions for restaurants. So everyone here is in different places. So I'm going to try to speak generally, but the reason that your mental health and your mindset, we need to talk frankly about that. It is the most important thing, no matter how severe your situation is or how severe your fears are. It's the most important thing that's going to help you keep moving forward. Even that family, they will eventually have to, figure out how they're going to move forward. And, Tony Robbins likes to say 80% of success is your mindset. And now, 20% is strategy. Your mind has to be in the right place to think of the strategies. And that's what, we want to talk in part today. I would like to talk about, how are you going to deal with your mental health, how you're going to get your mind in a more optimistic, believe it or not, it's possible, how you're going to cultivate that, and some of the things you can do, because that's my beginning.
All right, thank you. And Lewis, what's your perspective on what we can expect folks to get out of this today?
Well, at the risk of sounding a little rosy, because this is not a rosy time, there are going to be so many winners created out of this moment. There's so much disruption. There's so many old systems that if you had an idea for a business, you would never have been allowed to break through because old existing relationships were already in place, and many of them get broken. So even though this is sort of the cup is half full way of looking at things, I think the work that Diana is doing and the work that the Chamber is trying to bring to everybody is that business is business. Business has been absolutely disrupted. That word needs to be, underlined about 80 times to really capture the moment. But disruption is a powerful tool. And we use examples. I work with owners of businesses that do tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And while that may sound like a very high level, the truth is that also means, the old saying, more money, more problems. They've got factories, they've got hundreds or thousands of employees to manage. So they're struggling too. And I work very closely with the owners of these companies. That's pretty much the attitude that they've adopted is, what's the opportunity here? Now, that doesn't mean that they're not facing a crisis, but they're, the way they show up at work every day in their best days and their best moments is, what is the opportunity here? And so Diana says it's mindset. That's true. We have seen in our community of business owners, which is nationwide, we've seen things like beer distilleries, become hand sanitizer factories, which is kind of a common trope. But it's fun to watch these folks say, look, I've got some tools, I've got some people, I've got some skills. Maybe I can't sell beer, but I can sell hand sanitizer. It's all mindset at that point. And I think if we can spend some time today, letting people know that mindset is not a corny word. It's, it's a very powerful instrument, and that mindset leads to very specific action plans. We can talk about the business owners I've worked with directly, where specific business and action plans have taken place that have led to revenue and profits and turnarounds, all the stuff that we all want to get at the end of the day. It's always preceded by mindset.
I love that, turning it to make it a positive thing. But, so let's be real about what some of our small businesses in Brooklyn are really going through. And as Diana alluded to, right, Randy has done 17 corridor visits. He's out talking to businesses all day, every day. A lot of our team members are out there talking to businesses. And you, if you're on this as an attendee, you may be a business owner. You probably go to businesses in your neighborhood too, and you see we've gotten hammered. Our small business community has been completely hammered. They had to shut down most businesses for a few months, although not all. And now we're trying to figure out, if you're a restaurant, okay, so now I can open at 25% capacity. That's not going to be enough to make up for lost revenue. We've seen restaurants that have started to sell groceries, right? There are some that have been evolving or pivoting in that way. I hate using pivot because everybody uses that right now. But the reality is everyone has so much going on. If you have children, they're not in normal school. If you have older relatives, you may need to be taking care of them. You have your job and you're trying to struggle and figure all this out. So let's dig in a little bit more about, how do we get into the right mindset? That's a nice idea, but there's just so much happening. How do we do that?
I'm going to start. First, people have to really recognize and identify what their emotional state is. If you're overeating, or you're indulging in drinking, or you can't sleep, or your heart's racing, your stomach's churning, you may not even be tuned in. You may not even be saying, shit, I'm depressed, or I'm really anxious, I'm in a panic state. So first, people have to recognize that they may be in different times of the day, and depending on what day. And then what do you do with that? So, a lot of this is comes out of all our fears. Like, how am I going to do this? And most people are thinking about the worst case scenario. Some people, like that Haitian family, just as an example, that probably is their worst case scenario, right? And so you have to think about, what is the real fear here? If my worst case scenario is I'm going to lose my business, you have to understand your fears to deal with them, right? And I'm going to go a little deep, because people may not be tuned in at all, that it may be even exacerbated by your own personal background and history. So, like, let's say your parents were divorced when you were little or young, and no one helped you deal with your emotions. You were on your own. So some of the fear may be like, I'm on my own with this. I have no one to help me. Or a lot of fears are that I can't do this. I mean, that's the base of most fear. If the worst thing happens, I can't handle it. If I lose a family member, if I lose my business. But they do find, and there's research that most people do eventually come back to their baseline. So first you want to identify the fears, and then because you don't want to stay stuck in them, because it can be really paralyzing. And that's why, investing in, and I'm going to talk about the strategies for your mental health, is the best investment in your business, because it can be disabling. It can shut down creative thinking and, problem solving. So I'm going to give you like a quick overview, and then we can maybe dig into it a little more. You know, we want to hear from Lewis too, but I like people to think about like, what is their own formula for their peak mental state? And I find personally and professionally, it's a combination of stuff you do on your own and stuff you have to do with other people. And that stuff is, and this is going to sound maybe too trite or flippant, but it's really critical. I think I know that Randy is a runner, and I know Samara does some yoga. I know Lewis walks because I bump into him now on my morning walk. Getting your blood going, you know, if you have to get up early to squeeze in a short walk, I find I do my best thinking when I'm walking. I talk into my phone, ideas come to me. You do have to move and get your brain going. So that's one. You know, we've touched on meditation. Some people, they're too anxious. They can't even calm down to do some deep breathing, but some apps can help you, you know, you can eventually learn to calm your body and your mind, because when you can calm your own body and mind, you do again come to some creative problem solving. And you know, some of the most successful people in the world attribute their success to meditation. Bill Ford, of, you know, Oprah, Ray Diallo, but you know, one of them said it helped him through his darkest times. So let's not minimize like 5-10 minutes of building that in. And then writing is really therapeutic. You got to, and we'll talk later about some questions that you can write about, like what's your worst case scenario, and what could you do if that was, what are your plan A, B, and C, and D? There's a lot about writing to talk about making a list of your accomplishments and strengths so you can really hone in on what's going to help you in your future. And then the last one, I think that's absolutely critical, of course, is talking to people, right? It's talking to the right people. You know, maybe you do need a therapist. There is, you know, free, people are doing free. There's a mental health hotline, but I'm happy to direct people to finding that and processing their fears, and you will feel better. You'll feel lighter, and then you can take on things. But if you can't do that, you know, maybe a coach who's going to help you like problem solve and take small steps, because small steps lead to a large goal. And then the last thing, and Lewis and I will talk more about this later, is working with a group. The best brainstorming happens in collaboration. Like, you don't brainstorm, but you might in writing, but you need other people, just like we're going to be doing here today. And they're like, oh, I didn't think of that. Or people may say, well, have you thought about this? And, you know, working with a group can also keep you accountable, keeps you moving forward. So you could create your own. We're going to talk about a group we're doing. But anyway, that's like the big overview. And then we can dig more deeper into some of those things.
And I just want to note, because we talked about this a bit the last time we did one of these webinars, is you just said meditation for 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm not a big meditator. Actually, I don't even do yoga. I'm more of a Pilates person.
Oh, sorry.
No, but to your point, like even in the heat of COVID, when I was, you know, we all had a lot going on. For me, that's the one thing that keeps me grounded, is like getting up early and exercising. And I hate getting up early, but it's important. And the walking, what made me think about that is whatever it is for people. But just to say, an advantage that we have living in a place like Brooklyn, or if you're in this webinar and you live somewhere else in the city, there's community around you and life around you and people around you. And so I can just say, for me, it's not just a walk, because I do a lot of walking too. It's just like seeing the city is alive and people are here. Like, we're not alone. It's that weird city thing that we have where you can feel very lonely, but yet you're surrounded by a community. And that can be really helpful right now with the struggles that a city does have over COVID. We still have our community right here and people that we can see in real life on the street. So I wanted to say, at least for me, that resonates, that idea of like walking around my community, seeing businesses that are open, talking to some of the other business owners. You know, it helps, because like the work that we're doing, just connecting with people, it makes such a difference. I think that's one of the biggest struggles so many of us have, is we feel so isolated and alone. And we're all going through this in different ways and everyone's problems are unique. So
thank you, Samara, for sharing that. I do want to add that, you know, thank God we live in Brooklyn and not Manhattan, because I hear Manhattan, some neighborhoods are really quiet and dead and it's depressing. And I had the same experience. I've been in other parts of Brooklyn and I wanted to write an article, Brooklyn isn't fucking dead. Like there's so much vibrancy and, you know, people running and jogging and biking and talking and eating. And, you know, there are a lot of businesses open, even if they're struggling. And even in my neighborhood, like a 3-block radius, 5 new storefront businesses open. So I find it, I couldn't wait till I was away, you know, upstate for a week. I was like, I'm a city girl. I couldn't wait to come back to Brooklyn and the vibrancy here, because I find it very uplifting right now.
Yeah, I mean, so back to sort of the idea of folks that are able to take something like this and turn it into opportunity. I had a new place open up near me too, like a fast casual place. The food's amazing. And there are people that are willing to sort of step in and take risks right now. I also think, and Randy and I have talked about this a lot, I'm like, I think Brooklyn's going to come back faster. I think people want to be here. Not to say anything bad about Manhattan, but I think there are neighborhoods in Manhattan that it's going to take them longer to come back because of their economic base and, you know, some of the other factors there. But like Brooklyn is a city of neighborhoods and communities, and that makes us stronger. So I do think in terms of looking for opportunity and silver lining, which I try to do when I'm, you know, in the right mindset, like I couldn't be happier to be in this city, the city of Brooklyn, to be clear. Lewis, what would you like to jump in with on this point?
I have spent a lot of time working with, interviewing, studying, researching entrepreneurs in a lot of different stages of their development. And there were 3 behaviors, I ended up calling them the 3 habits, that really spoke to the success of the most successful people I interviewed, which are some fabulously successful people. And the first, I wrote a book called The First Habit. It is the first. It's present 100% of the time in successful people, which is that they spend time focusing on what they're good at, and they try to diminish spending time on anything they're bad at. Now, that sounds ridiculously simple, but the point is really simple. You have to figure out what you're good at, and then you have to architect a career or an entrepreneurial path that minimizes the things you're bad at. And this unlocks capability and talent and people everywhere. And so just to kind of ground it, anyone who has children and that child comes home with their report card and they got an A in math and a C in English, we can ask the question, should we get you a tutor in English, you got a C, or should we get you a tutor in math? Because that's what you're good at. And so actually accentuating what you're good at and minimizing what you're bad at is the first habit. The reason why that's important right now is because a lot of us are learning very quickly through this disruptive time what it is we are good at and what we are bad at. And so we should pay attention to that and use this information, this data that's coming our way to make better decisions about how we spend our time going forward. The second habit also speaks to this moment. It's that the most successful entrepreneurs push through when they experience adversity. I mean, if you just want to separate 2 groups, there's going to be the ones who fall down and never get back up, and the ones who fall down and get back up. And so that's easy to say, but the point is we can just figure out which group is going to succeed by the ones who take adversity as a positive information resource, as opposed to one who says, well, gee, that's evidence I shouldn't have done this to begin with, or gee, the world really, you know, pounded me, and that's really the end of the story here. We have to persevere in the face of adversity. We must have that as a second habit. And the third, which Diana spoke about a little bit, is we have to surround ourselves with people who are going the same way we're going. So if you want to quit smoking, hang out with people who don't smoke. If you want to start exercising early in the morning, spend more time with people who exercise early in the morning. If you're feeling down and blue at this time, you can either spend time with other people who are feeling down and blue, or you can spend time with people who are optimistic, persevering through adversity, figuring out more of what they're good at and less of what they're bad at. And you can surround yourself with what I think of as a 3 habits environment, or a 3 habits social network, and let the social contagion of that group positively infect you so that you can do great work. Those are the 3 habits. Figure out what you're good at and do more of it, persevere in the face of adversity, and surround yourself with people who are trying to do better and going your way.
Let's dig into that a little bit. And, Diane and Lewis, I'd like for you guys both to join in. And Randy, of course, feel free to chime in at any point. Um, you know, so looking at do only the things that you're good at, like I just want to dig into. So I'm a small business owner. I do everything myself. I don't have any capital right now, right? All the things that are happening for a lot of business people. How do you then try to focus on the things that you're good at if there's nobody to do the other things?
Right. So that's a fantastic and razor sharp way to like pull the veil off the stupidity of some of these questions, of these things we share. And I think the answer is there's a lot of disruption right now with a lot of people. So let's say it's a restaurant, and let's say you're really a good front of the house person. You're good at greeting the guests, making people feel good. You're the maitre d'. You're not a great cook. That doesn't mean you didn't start out life as a chef, by the way, but you're not the best chef. And that's one of the important things to learn here. You may have thought of yourself as a good chef, but maybe during this process, you've discovered you're not the best chef. Well, there's a lot of disruption now. So there's a lot of opportunity to reach out to other people and see, even though I started a restaurant because I'm a good chef, but not a great chef, and I found that I'm particularly good at the front of the house work, I need to find a partner who's a back of the house person. But there's been tons of disruption. So there's going to be people out there who are back of the house people who've been waiting for a front of the house person to step forward. So if you're not good at something, you don't have the money to do it, you're going to have to reach out to those tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people who've also been dislodged, who are also committing to what they've decided they're good at. And I think that opportunity exists now more than ever. I know all the business owners in my community who've experienced people leaving because the COVID furloughs and the COVID shutdowns really affected a lot of people professionally. They reevaluated their professional pursuits. There's been tremendous turnover at a lot of businesses. I think what that means is that there's tremendous availability of talent. So if you are good at X and someone's good at Y, find that person. They're likely out there now. I know that sounds, again, simple and Pollyannish, but actually more than ever, they're likely out there right now.
And I'm going to add to what Lewis is saying, because he and I came to a similar viewpoint on leaning into your strengths. His came out of like hundreds of entrepreneurs he's interviewed over the years and what's made them successful. And mine came out of, working with various people and then just looking at what helped me in my own life pivot. I know we don't want to use that word too much, but pivoting means changing and expanding. It doesn't necessarily mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater. But, over time, at crossroads that I was at, and I do recommend this to people to start to figure out, like, what is that skill and talent that I'm best at, is write down, like, go through your life. You start with childhood. What were the things that you were really good at? And what were your accomplishments through your life? And look for themes. I mean, I did this exercise myself and, started highlighting themes. I'm like, oh, and the more you winnow it down, you may own a restaurant, but your strength may be that you're really great with people. Like, people would come in your restaurant and they're like, "That's Joe, we left," and that's why they come there. So, how do you use that strength? A quick example for myself, I was an artist since I could hold a pencil, and that was my life goal. I had a lot of art talent. I got scholarship to school. I was in museum. I had lots of commissioned work. And then at the end of the day, I was alone painting and I got really depressed. And for people who know me, I'm super social. And I was like, shoot, what do I do now? Like, I mean, that was like a big change, but it was like an existential crisis. Like, I'm going to give up my whole identity. That was my identity my entire life. That's Diana, she's this artist. But there was another thing that I didn't pay attention to that much is people always were talking to me. People confided in me. I did some bartending. You're a therapist anyway, but even as a kid. And I also loved getting people together, which later in my life, I did a lot of events, as you may know, for, various organizations. But it is a passion of mine. And so then I was like, oh, really, my strength was that I'm good with people. And so that's when I shifted into social work, and all the other things I do come out of that one strength that, you know, I like to understand somebody so I can help them, or an organization so I can help them. So that's like my best talent, I would say. So people have to think about for themselves, and Lewis may talk more about this. You know, when I'm at a crossroad, I make a list of people who know me, and I'm like, who can I talk to? Randy's been one of them, you know, who know what I'm good at. What do they think maybe I could be doing now? And every single time it's paid off, like every time. So you want to think about reaching out, and it may be scary and like, oh my God, I don't sound like, how can I ask somebody what they think of me? But ask them, like, if they were writing a reference for you, what would they say about you? What sets you apart and makes you and your business distinctive and unique? So that's what I would add about that.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful in terms of what we started off with in this conversation, which is like, what are opportunities now, and how do we, you know, I think Lewis, you said this is one of those times where everything is disrupted, including for many of us, our day-to-day lives. And, you know, when you're finally at a point where you can get your head on straight and think about some of this stuff, the idea of looking back into what you were good at as a kid, that's sort of fascinating to me. Like, I wonder what I would come up with, because, you know, for many of us, it's like you do your thing and you keep going, and then you do the next thing and you keep going, and like, you don't really have time to stop and think about things in that way. So this is a good time to do that if you're able to.
Everyone has, I was gonna say, everyone has time. If you have to do it at night instead of scrolling or watching something, you're gonna get out a notebook, and you can do for 10 minutes of writing and go back through your life. It's profound. You will process and be working this stuff out if you do that. Sorry.
No, that actually, there's another thing that I would like to get to in a minute, but you kind of bring up the social media hole, like, that people end up going into, especially late at night. I think that's a common thing. I'm going to set that aside for now, but I do think it kind of feeds into the follow-up question that I had for both of you. And you brought up sort of people around you, who you decide to surround yourself with. So, you know, as I like to ask these very direct questions, Lewis, like, what do you do when you're cooped up in your house with 4 people who maybe are going through whatever they're going through? And like, it feels harder than ever sometimes. I mean, now we're in the summer, so fortunately we can see each other outside to some extent, but like, we're going to end up in a situation again where many of us are going to be inside a lot with the same group of people if we're not alone, and some people are alone by themselves. Like, how do you then get access to people that can help you think through things in a productive and positive way?
Oh, that tricky little thing called the internet. So this blew me away. So I think I have the name right. I'm going to ask Ty if she could Google this name to see if she could share the URL. It's called Lunch Club. And so I did this because I was, you know, working from home for months on end and pretty lonely. Lunch Club is where you tell the system about yourself, and they basically pair you off, and you are told that you're invited to have lunch with this individual virtually on such a date, such a time. And that, I did it a few times. And one time I met this young, I'm 50, so I'm like, he's younger than me, he's a young kid. He was a 20-something-year-old kid, an immigrant. He was living in Corona or something like that, East Elmhurst. And we just had the best conversation. And he was interesting, and he was very steeped in technology. And we had super cool conversation with him. Then I turn around and I see a news report that Lunch Club has been valued at something like $400 million by the last VC who invested in it. So I'm clearly not the only one who's taking advantage of this. So, you know, it always starts with Google, right? I mean, I have a 16-year-old son, and he asks me questions, and I say, just type those exact words into Google, you get an answer. So how do you meet people when you're stuck at home? Probably it's going to get you to something like Lunch Club. I mean, it's out there, and you can meet super interesting people. I never would have met that young man on my own. I just wouldn't have. And I'm so happy that I did.
I love that. I didn't know about Lunch Club, but I just pulled this book off the shelf, Never Eat Alone, which was an inspirational book for me when I was working on trying to open a health club. But whether you're alone in the pandemic or alone anyway, I think even before the pandemic, a lot of people have a really hard time reaching out, you know, and it really is finding your inner chutzpah to get your nerve up, because I would start with people that, you know, like I really would what I like to recommend is make a plan for your week. Look at your week and schedule in a call. Doesn't have to be Zoom, but it is nice to see people, but people are getting Zoom fatigue somewhat. Schedule a call with somebody you know, who knows you, who's upbeat, and it's going to help build some momentum for a call for someone else you've always wanted to talk to. But you know, a little bit, you know, reach out to them and ask them for some advice, and maybe they know somebody. You know, you can network now, and network sounds so negative, but network is relationship building. Network is not going to an event and shoving your card in somebody's face. It's talking to people. And I had experience similar to Lewis. In fact, I bumped into him here, Greenpoint Terminal Market, on the weekends. I recommend it's amazing. There's you know, vendors and food, and there was disco roller skating that I bumped into Lewis and we roller skated together. It's a really creative use of a parking lot that this young lady, she put it all together. And I had a long conversation with her about it. They have tours, boat tours around the Statue of Liberty, and all these vendors, an opportunity for them to help have some income. They had comedy, they had a band, they had food trucks. I mean, and it's huge. So it's not like you feel on top of each other. I think they're going to do it through October. I ended up talking to 5 different vendors. I met this young man from Haiti. He totally made my day. A guy from Haiti, I mean, he, you know, they've been through such horror, and he had this upbeat positivity about himself. And I just, you know, was drawn to him. And I met a bunch of other people that once we got talking, you know, I think we both left feeling upbeat. It has to have some intent, the reaching out, but just talk to people and it will get you in the groove I mean, you can do it from home, but you're going to have to push yourself to reach out.
Yeah, I mean, I think something interesting about now is, in a way, it could theoretically be easier to network with people because we are more accessible. We're not commuting. We're not running all over the place. We don't have events every single night sort of out. And I'm speaking from, you know, personally in the chamber work that we do, like we're a little bit, we're all working, I don't know, more than ever, I think, but there may be an easier ability to connect with people that normally would have a harder time making time for something like this half-hour kind of call. Yes, Randy?
So I have a question for our panelists. You know, we're experiencing a lot of entrepreneurs who, under normal conditions, ran pretty successful businesses, and believe me, their mindset is generally optimistic, and in some cases, they've tried to exploit disruption and new opportunities. But there are some things that are just beyond their control, right? When government says you can't do X, Y, and Z that relates to your business model, and you can't reopen, or you can't, you know, only 25% capacity, you know, how can you help them to not see that as personal failure, right? I mean, it's really not. I mean, so that would be my question to Lewis and then Diana.
Yeah, that's a great question, Randy. So it's, first of all, we take the person and then we separate the person from the business. So the person has a restaurant, and for regulatory reasons, they can't operate like a normal restaurant, and they say this isn't working. I would start by saying, you know, and this would be, again, a little Pollyannish, but I would start by having a great conversation with that person about what have they learned and what skills have they accumulated, what network have they accumulated, what resources have they accumulated that can be useful in the next thing they do. You see, I just think that there's it's just a hobgoblin that person who ran a Caribbean food restaurant down on Atlantic has to run a Caribbean food restaurant down on Atlantic. I mean, we have to take that entire skill set and say, where does this belong? And so I have seen a lot of, I'll give you an example. A member of my community had, they made mobile phone protective devices and they sold through malls. And so instantly they saw a 90% drop off in revenue because the malls got shut down. So they switched gears entirely towards developing an antiviral covering for phones that they would sell through different channels. So they had this long background in mobile phone protective devices, but they had never really been in the antiviral world. And they had a distribution network that was in malls, and they reached out to all those mall operators and said, can you find another way to sell this antiviral system? And they ended up literally doing, you know, almost the equivalent of door-to-door, electronic door-to-door, you know, almost like an Avon style for the new age. And so we worked very closely with that set of business owners. They experienced a 90% drop off. It's pretty much catastrophic. And they said, you know, we had this antiviral project on our list of things to look at, but it was like 50th on our list. Well, after this happened, it became number one on our list. So I think that one of the things I've seen are that entrepreneurs who've said, I have this thing on my list, but I'm so busy doing my day job, I haven't really gotten to it, have this opportunity to look through that list, see what belongs much, much higher, ask themselves which skills and resources, networks they've developed that would allow them to take advantage of it. And to say, wow, that restaurant where I serve food to people at lunch and at dinner, yeah, that's not fitting in this moment, but I have a whole other set of skills that I learned from that experience that do fit. And that I've seen that happen so many times that even though that sounds a little far-fetched, it happens a lot.
Randy, I really so glad you brought that question up, because I actually had it in my notes of, like, you know, what could come up today. That is also what I'm hearing, that some people, not everybody, feel like a failure. And, you know, I just want to remind everybody, we've never in 100 years had a situation like this. Nobody failed. Whatever decisions, you know, you made in the past, you needed to make at that time. They were the right decisions at the time, and now they don't work. But the feelings of failure, like feelings of fear, do run pretty deep within a person, and they may need to do a little exploring of why they particularly feel like a failure when, you know, I don't know, whatever the number is, 3/4 of restaurants have shut down. Like, nobody's done anything wrong. But like Lewis said, then I think what will help remind them, if I'm going to go back to writing down all you have accomplished, all you have created. And so people forget, they forget like how you did come to have that successful business. You know, I mean, I've been through this with my husband after the recession. He's a photographer. He had a very successful photography business. He had a staff of 10, which was unusual for a photographer, 2 floors in the Flatiron district, and the recession hit, and all of the magazines he worked for went in-house, they folded. And I mean, it was really, I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, you know, he really struggled with that for a long time. And it's a recession. Like, there's so many people that were hit hard by this. You know, he had to let go everybody over time and, you know, reconfigure how he was going to work. So that's the key, though. And it comes back to, you know, building, I would say, confidence and some self-esteem. And, you know, turning to people who know you, doing some writing and looking inward, and reminding yourself of everything that they have done. But they will, like Lewis's great examples, you know, if they can calm their mind enough and do enough brainstorming with people, they may come to the antiviral screen idea. You know, their second idea, the third idea still may not fly, but they have to keep looking for those ideas, and that's where cultivating more optimism is critical. Because we all know stories of famous people who had like a million ideas, but it was that one idea that finally flew.
And Diana, I just take a moment to tell these guys about the group that we're putting together.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Well, I was going to invite you to talk about it.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, so that being said, Lewis and I are super excited that we're going to offer 6 people here to do an intensive 5-day group with us for free. We're hoping to start it September 25th, and we're taking 6 people. All you need to do is email me. Lewis and I are going to pick the 6 people who are going to write where would they like to be in 6 months, but why is this pivot for you so important? We want to hear, you know, why do you need this now? So, and part of that will be, you know, 4 days, Lewis and I working with the group, and one day in the middle, I'm going to be doing one-on-one coaching sessions with each 6 people. So 90 minutes of the group, and then one day we'll spend an hour individually, and then the rest immersion is with Lewis and I. So it's never ever been offered. Lewis has never, he does a lot of groups, but like to get him to do this with me for offering free is pretty damn exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing opportunity. So we just put in the chat box Diana's email address. If you're interested in being part of this group, please email Diana by tomorrow evening. Or when do you want to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tomorrow
So,
evening.
by tomorrow evening, email Diana why you want to participate in this group, sort of what you're trying to work toward, a little bit about yourself, and Diana will get back to you. So that's in the chat box there. So we're almost out of time. Normally we ask people to put questions in the Q&A. So if you do have questions that you want to put in the Q&A, we can always follow up with you afterward. But while you're doing that, so if anyone has questions, just put them in the Q&A. It's a little bubble at the bottom of your screen. And Randy, I'm going to turn it over to you. We'll see if any questions come in to talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that we have going on and opportunities for businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got a few minutes. We usually go over the hour period. If you can't stay, that's okay. I just want to throw a couple of things out. They're kind of like lightning round here, if we can. But tell us, can you both, or one of you, sort of the importance of small wins, right? Especially during an unprecedented crisis. I mean, I've learned that. We may not necessarily hit the home run, but a single here and there can really help us to reframe our mindset. So either one of you want to weigh in on that?
Well, I have seen a number of businesses kind of jump on the PPE bandwagon, and that's fine. That is kind of a small win. I mean, instantly they were selling a product, masks or other things, and finding traction because they had good reputations with, let's say, 100 customers who would take their calls. And so they said, I've got this other thing to sell you. And they would get some small wins and some traction. It's really what you said. It just feels like progress. Action alleviates anxiety. So even if it's kind of a here today, gone tomorrow business proposition, it's not a bad way to keep everyone motivated.
I love that. Action alleviates anxiety. That's a really good statement. I love that. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I have seen that quite a bit. And other small wins, I'll say this much, but this is sort of a contradictory thing, is this is also a time to hone your instincts. And so when you do try something, you do try a pivot, decide for yourself whether you want to give it a day, a week, a month, or a year. But, this is the best business owners have the best instincts. And so if you try something, it's a measure of whether your instincts are pointing in the right direction. If it does not find traction, it's a measure of your instincts saying, okay, this didn't work. Let me try the next thing. So I just think out of this difficult period, do a little instinct development, which is a weird and hard thing to say.
And I just want to emphasize something you said, Lewis, which I think is really important. We're not going to always try the right things ever, but that includes now. And so if you try something and it doesn't work out, okay, stop. Don't make yourself crazy. Try the next thing, right? Like not everything's going to work, nor should it. And I think in your experience working with high power professionals, incredibly successful people, or experience for folks that have just, like you said, Randy, run a solid business for a really long time, right? Some things as we try and change may not work as we intended them to. So we just have to be like, okay, that didn't work. Now let me try the next thing. I
will say that the entrepreneurs that I know and love, they don't really use the word failure. They do use the word pivot, but they mean it in the sense of, that's our job, is to just keep plugging away at things and trying things. It's our job. And when I sit down with a business owner who describes half a dozen initiatives, they never contemplate failure, even though failure is likely for 100% of them, or maybe 80% of them. you know, failure is inevitable. They just don't dwell on it. Their job is to try, and then, you know, look for what came out of the rubble of trying, I think.
Okay, Diana, don't sweat the small stuff. I know this is a big thing for you. How important is it right now in this time?
Randy, it's like you've been reading my notes here, because action alleviates anxiety, and each small step builds momentum to the next accomplishment. So, I mean, this is going to sound really micro, but when you get out of bed in the morning, you make your bed. That's your first accomplishment. You know, if you put on your workout clothes and you go for a walk, now that's cued you to the next accomplishment. And I would encourage, you know, and then it keeps going, because this is cultivating an optimistic mind, right? Seeing the glass half full. This is what I can do. And, you know, I don't have COVID. I'm walking today, you know. I mean, you have to reframe, I think you said it, on what are accomplishments. And I'm just going to share, when I was in one of my darkest times, I suffered with severe postpartum anxiety. I instinctively just started keeping a journal, and I would only write down the smallest things, no matter how small, that I accomplished that day. And I didn't know that that was building me to feel better about myself, but like, I made my baby a bottle, I took him for a walk. I mean, these were really, to anyone else, seemed teeny, and to me felt monumental. So I would do that kind of writing, the small micro moments, and then like bigger ones, like what victory did you have this week, and what did you create this year? You know, you want to keep focusing on what you can do, what you did do. And go back to Lewis's point, if you're an entrepreneur, you've had some downturns, right? You may have lost businesses before. Again, look at what did you do that you have within you that helped you get back on the horse and rebuild and move forward. Most people, if you're old enough, maybe not if you're 20, but if you're old enough, everybody's like fallen down. So you want to, again, you know, look at what you've done, and those are accomplishments, your past.
I'd like to share two stories from the world of entrepreneurship that, you know, when we talk about entrepreneurs, we end up inevitably talking about Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and you know, they're entrepreneurs too, but they don't always feel like us. One of the stories, though, I love is a 23-year-old Mark Zuckerberg is offered $100 million for this thing called Facebook, because the prospective buyer says, you have really captured the college market. Nobody's captured the college market. I'll give you $100 million. Can you imagine any 23-year-old cashing a $100 million check where that wouldn't be the most amazing success story you ever heard? And Mark Zuckerberg said, no, I have something much bigger in mind. And it became the Facebook we know today, which has nothing to do with college kids. It's everyone, everywhere. And of course, he's made a lot more money than $100 million. Sometimes what looked like a step or an increment here that would have been the end of a story is really the launching pad to a much bigger story. Steve Jobs was kicked out of Apple, you know, the company he started, only to come back and turn it into one of the most successful companies. Today, Apple is the single most valuable public company in the world. Sometimes when you say, well, the COVID ruined my restaurant, and that was the end of that restaurant, we have to try we have to think about what could happen next. But that's when I moved into this other thing. Travis Kalanick started Uber. He built this kind of change in how people get around. And he got kicked out of his company because there was some bad behavior that was probably appropriate. But he reemerged as somebody who's now creating these things called ghost kitchens. So this is important. So ghost kitchens are, they're basically, if you use Seamless or Postmates or whatever, it's as if you're ordering from a Chinese restaurant or Italian restaurant, but it's really all coming from the same kitchen. It's called a ghost kitchen. And it looks like a catering kitchen. It's a commercial kitchen. So I ask anyone here who's been in, as an example, who's been in the catering business, why can't they reinvent themselves as a ghost kitchen? Travis Kalanick's ghost kitchen has been valued at $400 million. It's a string of commercial kitchens. There are people right now who have commercial kitchens. Why can't they reemerge as a ghost kitchen? The story of one ending and, you know, leading to the next chapter of a new beginning can be the most amazing and dramatic story you could ever possibly have imagined, but you have to see it that way.
So,
Lewis, would you mind, I don't know if we have a minute for this, but One of his other stories that I just love, though it took a long time, is your coffee guy, and how one business he had really wasn't the success business that he has today. I don't know, could you share that a little bit?
Yeah, real quick. I know we're almost out of time, and I know Randy wants to say something, but this is a gentleman who operated out of the Brooklyn Army Terminal. He had something like 50,000 square feet of space, filled to the rim with office furniture he had bought from offices that had liquidated, gone out of business. He'd buy all their furniture, reupholster it, fix it up, and sell it back to the next office that had an idea to start a new organization. And it was a thriving $7 million business. But if you talk to him about what it was vans that broke down, and they got parking tickets, and they had, you know, customers who wanted to send their stuff back, and upholsterers who were craftsmen who were dying out and weren't going to be around. He listed out a series of challenges. As he shared the business profile with us in our Birthing of Giants program, he described one tiny little bright spot, which is that they deliver coffee to their customers in what's called corporate coffee services, and that was a pretty good business. That was a $100,000 profit line, a revenue line of a $7 million business. After a while, he realized that was the business. Today, that is a $25 million business, and he's completely out of the office furniture business. He loves coffee because it's light. He can ship it through UPS. He loves the business he's in. And it all came out of the ashes of a much harder business that he was involved in.
Thanks.
Great example. This has been wonderful. I'll throw in another example. I mean, as Samara mentioned, I've done 17 commercial corridor visits since phase 1 reopening. Met with a lot of businesses. I mean, it's just incredible the amount of resiliency and creativity that I've seen. I'll give you another example, a more recent example. So Byklyn Cycle, BYKLYN Cycle, owned by Amy Glosser, was an indoor cycling studio, and yeah, she couldn't reopen. I mean, there was no indoor fitness activity, and I met her when she was just on the cusp of this idea about leasing an empty lot not too far away, and literally setting up an outdoor cycling studio. And she wasn't sure how it was going to go, but I have to tell you, when I met her, her frame of mind was very positive and optimistic. A couple of weeks later, it was in the press. It was a huge success story. And I just talked to her yesterday. She's doing great. She keeps trying to convince me to come on out and do a session, and maybe I'll take her up on it. But kudos to her. And there's just countless numbers of stories of folks that have been really, really super creative and have learned a lot of things, as Lewis, as you mentioned. They're sort of learning that there are new ways to do business. There are new ways to envision their old business model and kind of reframe that. So this was a great session. I want to thank both Diana and Lewis, as well as Ty and Samara, for really putting this together. We do a lot of technical assistance type webinars, as we should. We're a chamber, and we need to talk about PPP, and we need to talk about idle loans. We need to talk about regulations and phase reopenings, but we don't always get to address some of the more personal and psychological aspects of this. And I greatly appreciate your insights and bringing them to our members. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Couple of quick announcements on the chamber front. First of all, thank you all who have joined us. I saw some of our great chamber members that are on some of our board members as well that have joined us. Thank you for being with us. We have pivoted, we as a chamber, and by the way, our role has evolved from March, when the economy was completely shut down, through this reopening. And we've done a lot of great work. Very proud of the team. Yesterday, we won an award from 1010 Wins, a Community Small Business Leadership Award, along with the Hospitality Alliance, which was a recognition of our pivot. And we're doing a lot of work out on the ground right now. So our current sort of incarnation is to deploy boots on the ground, going out to where the businesses need support, and helping them in any way they need help, right? So whether it's access to financing, whether it's support with e-commerce transition, whether it's helping to sift through some of the regulatory issues that have changed pretty much overnight, whether it's giving them access to third-party resources like legal consultations for lease renegotiations, whether it's getting them access to PPE. We're delivering a lot of PPE. We still have a lot of PPE that you could order if you're a business, and we'll actually deliver it. It's masks, gloves, but it's also thermometers and goggles and sanitizer. We provide grants for deep cleanings. So restaurants that may be reopening indoors may need a deep cleaning. We have Brooklyn-based businesses that do the deep cleaning, so it's a win-win. All of that is ongoing, and you could email any of us, and we can get you in touch with the right staff member to facilitate that. But we also have our BCC COVID-19 resources page just for businesses. If you go on brooklynchamber.com, we have a one-stop page where you could access information about what resources are available for small businesses, what changes there are on the regulatory front. We keep that updated daily. So please do check that out. Use that as your one-stop information resource page for what businesses need to know about reopening and recovery. We have some events coming up that I want you to be aware of. Our Breakfast for Success series, where we actually talk to entrepreneurs, will continue. It's the third in our series, coming up on September 24th at 11 a.m. Be virtual through Zoom. Once again, go on brooklynchamber.com if you want to register. We're going to talk to some of the longer-standing Brooklyn-based businesses who've decided to stay around, multi-generational businesses who are Brooklyn tough and want to tell their story. We have our membership orientation on September 29th, 10 a.m. Once again, that is virtual. On October 1st, we have a special event for manufacturers, how to increase sales, partnering with Alibaba for business-to-business relationships facilitated for manufacturers. Save the date. We are going to do an annual meeting this year. It'll be virtual, but it'll be November 5th. So sorry, we won't be indulging at wonderful food at Gargiulo's, but we will still be hearing from a wonderful keynote speaker who will probably talk about the impact of the elections, which will, November 5th will be 2 days after the election. So we're going to want to hear some insights in terms of how that's going to impact us here in New York. And then, yes, I just want to reiterate that we do still have our Bring Back Brooklyn Fund very active. We're offering no interest loans for small businesses that qualify, as well as PPE grants and PPE equipment. So that is still very active. There's an application on our website under our financing section, brooklynchamber.com. And it's just been great to sort of meet so many businesses along the way, hear your stories. I know it's hard. I know it's challenging. I know there are things that we just can't control, but I am every day inspired by your stories about pivoting and reinventing and reframing, quite frankly, your business model. And I am thankful to all of you who have not given up on Brooklyn, have not given up on New York City when it would have been easy to do so. So know that the Chamber is here to be your support in whatever efforts that you're putting out there, really to save your business, but also to save our neighborhoods and to save our borough and to save our city. So with that, thank you again to our host, Samara. She always does an amazing job facilitating these conversations. Thank you to Diana, Lewis, and thank you, of course, to Ty, who puts these events together for us. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of the week and a fantastic weekend.